Good morning, everybody. My name's Greg Shanahan, the Managing Director of TIN Technology Investment Network and medical device company Verify. I'd like to welcome you to the launch of the HealthTech Sector report. This report is a collaboration between CMDT and TIN, Consortium for Medical Device Technologies, and Technology Investment Network. And today in particular, I'd like to thank Diana and the CMDT team, Brendan Marenka and our team, and Ashley and Sarah in particular for today's event and for a fantastic report. So this is our first ever virtual event in the history of TIN. And so if you look to the right-hand side of the screen, there'll be a chat window there that you can post questions. Brendan will be moderating the Q&A after the panel discussion. And we'll have polls appearing during the event and handouts available at the end. So I'd like to thank our sponsors. The sponsors for TIN, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, EY, Absolute IT, BNZ, James and Wells, and NZX. In particular, I'd like to thank the sponsors of the Health Tech Insights report, NZHIT, HINS, MTANS, MB, NZTE, ATEED, CureKids, and TIN member Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. Without their generous support, this report wouldn't have been possible. And now we'll show you a summary video of the report findings. The report was the brainchild of Dr. Diana Su. Diana is the co-founder of the Consortium for Medical Device Technologies. She's been working for 10 years in the space of health tech innovation and has a PhD in chemistry from Auckland University. Diana approached TIN last year to try and create some transparency for the sector to foster partnership and investment. And Diana and I will be presenting the findings over the next little while. Diana, I'll pass over to you. Welcome.
Hi, and hi everyone in the virtual world as well. Well, it's been a great pleasure to work with you, Greg, on this report, but it is definitely the result of teamwork. Today, health tech is New Zealand's largest secondary industry at 1.9 billion with 185 homegrown entities in medical devices, digital health and pharmaceuticals. It is anchored by a $1 billion multinational medical device company, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. So compare this back to 2009 when I first started working in the sector. At that time, health tech was a $1 billion industry with at most 30 to 40 companies and a supporting ecosystem that was at its infancy. Fisher & Paykel Healthcare was a $500 million company then. What this report shows is that New Zealand is building healthcare solutions needed today, but are also addressing the future. Greg and I will cover some highlights, but download the report for a fuller picture. New Zealand's HealthTech sector has a very long history, traceable back to 1873 to Joseph Nathan, who formed Glaxo, which later became GSK. And the most ubiquitous medical device, the disposable syringe, actually came from New Zealand as well, invented by Colin Murdoch in 1966. Today, New Zealand has a vibrant but young health tech industry. It is a mix of 22 established companies with revenue of 2 million and above, shown in the top 3 tiers of our Christmas tree here. However, there is a large cohort in the pre-revenue to $2 million phase, and this cohort, which is about 88% of our health tech companies, are mainly in devices, digital health, and diagnostics. While being young is an opportunity for New Zealand, there is also a need to attract partnerships and investment to push our early stage companies up the value chain to ensure that the opportunities they bring to healthcare or economic growth is not lost. Now, these are the 185 health tech companies in New Zealand spread across, and they are spread across the nation in 4 main hubs. Auckland is the largest, followed by Canterbury, Wellington, and Otago, with Wellington and Otago really about similar in size. This shows that health tech has critical mass and spread across the nation, not just in Auckland. There is no real specific specialization in these hubs, so all house some activity across the industry. Now, Greg, what's the sector growth trends these days?
Thanks, Di. I guess the most exciting thing is the momentum of the sector. So those 22 companies have combined revenues of 1.9 billion and have a 5-year CAGR compound annual growth rate of 9%. Last year, they grew by collectively by $92 million, and already from the returns of listed companies for the March 2020 year, we expect that growth to be double that figure. But encouragingly, these companies are not only growing, but they're increasingly profitable. So EBITDA profit grew by 18% last year, and so too have the fortunes of our listed companies improved, with significant share price increases for AFT Pharmaceuticals and Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, which is now the largest company on the NZX by market capitalisation. The exciting thing about these companies, particularly with the current international environment, is that they're primarily based in the Northern Hemisphere, with only around about 20% of revenue coming from Australasia, compared to, say, around about 50% for the rest of the 10 companies. So heavily in North America, nearly 40%, Europe about a quarter, and excitingly 15% in Asia. What this means with the recent decline in the value of the New Zealand dollar, all of these exporters will be getting a boost just from the positive currency differential. So this creates exciting opportunities for New Zealand. The sector currently employs about 7,600 people, but it's fostering a high wage economy where the average wage per employee is $85,000 per annum, which is 40% higher than the New Zealand average. So not only are these jobs growing, but high wage job opportunities are increasing. And so too is the diversity in the sector. If we look at it broken down by medical devices, digital technology, and pharmaceuticals, you can see on the top line, that's the share accounted for medical device technologies at close to 63%, largely contributed to by Fisher & Paykel Healthcare. But then when we go down to the early stage companies, we see a far more even spread, about 40% each from digital technology and medical devices, and around about 18% from pharmaceuticals. There's been strong growth across the board, and particularly in pharmaceuticals, with positive growth by AFT and pharmaceuticals and Fisher & Paykel Healthcare in Australia and the United States, respectively. The hallmark of these companies is innovation, and they're spending a lot on R&D, and I'll pass over to you, Di.
Okay, well, I was just excited to say that science is driving growth in New Zealand's health tech sector, whether it is company or university-driven R&D. and deep tech startups, many from our universities, are giving depth and competitive advantage to the sector, particularly in the devices and digital health space. There are several sources of R&D funding, and we've indicated some of them in the bullet points here. However, I'd just like to point out there's one key government initiative that has supported technology growth in New Zealand, and that is the building of critical mass around collaborative research partnerships between universities and end users, whether companies or health providers. So one relevant example, Greg, is in health tech, is the MedTech Center of Research Excellence, or MedTech Core, and this one is actually funded by the Tertiary Education Commission. The core is hosted out of the University of Auckland and is the only translational medtech platform which pulls together academia, clinical fraternity, and business. And amongst its activities are growing specifically trained graduates for the sector, as well as developing technologies. The entities like the core is sparking new portfolios. In the terms of the MedTech core, it's coming out with new diagnostics and therapies for gut health, which includes companies, new startups like the Insights Company and FlexiMed. Now, New Zealand's early stage companies are competitive globally in terms of their technologies, but Greg, they really need investment to grow and flourish.
Absolutely right, Di. So what we've established so far is that there's significant momentum, particularly for our larger companies in the health tech sector, and a rich base of innovative companies coming through. Also internationally with COVID-19, there's a total reinvention of the way that healthcare is delivered and rapid speeding up of decision-making in the healthcare market. So huge opportunity. The gap that we have really is in funding. So fairly modest amounts coming into the health tech sector. And last year, angel investment was around about 14 million, and a big need for Series A and beyond rounds to take these companies to fulfill their full potential. And so the exciting thing about New Zealand for investors is we have the base. So we have this rich ecosystem that's been established over the years, collaboration between universities and the healthcare sector and industry. Di, tell us more about that.
Well, yes, I'm really glad to say that 10 years into the future from 2009, we now have a very healthy innovation ecosystem that is really well connected across all stakeholders. And as you say, from government organizations to DHBs, industry, research, and investors. Now, this is a simplified picture here, but you can see a lot of players in the ecosystem. And if you want to drill down into the fine detail, you can have a look at the report. Now, the internal linked up structure of our ecosystem is important for supporting our industry and research, but we still have a lot of work to do in our connections to international investment and partnerships with multinationals, which we will need to supercharge sector growth in the next decade. You kind of mentioned COVID-19. So as in the last 4 or 5 weeks, we've all experienced a very different world. And over the COVID-19 lockdown, our ecosystem showed the ability to effectively support researchers, industry, and government with advice, links to people and projects. And New Zealand companies also contributed in many ways, and we thought it would be very appropriate to showcase some of these today. This slide here gives an example of what has been happening. We have companies like Fisher & Paykel Healthcare and QSI who are stuck to their knitting, doing what they do best because their technology is critical to addressing the COVID-19 response. Then we also have companies that have used their expertise to create new responses, including addressing testing, track and tracing, managing risks, and joining the research for new vaccines. The research sector has also provided effort in the fast development of PPE, ventilators, disinfection technology, and thermal imaging. So today, Greg, we should acknowledge the huge effort that everyone has put in to keep New Zealand safe. Now, over the last 10 years, the health tech sector, it is an important sector for New Zealand with a dual role of contributing to the economy as well as health outcomes. And the sector has enjoyed sustained growth in the past 10 years, and we expect this to continue, especially in the current environment. COVID-19, as you and I know, have broken many health systems globally. But what it has done, it has also accelerated an adoption of technologies that you have mentioned, and it will create a more efficient health system in the future. The health system has identified the urgency in using technology to care for people remotely, especially the elderly and vulnerable. The adoption of telehealth has skyrocketed, and this is the new norm, which is here and here to stay. It has created new and significant opportunities in digital healthcare. So what our report shows is that the depth in New Zealand's sector and the growing number of smart devices and digital health companies and the research pipeline which can support strategies for future healthcare. So I guess my question is what we can do to move fast and hard to grab hold of the opportunities presented. What say you, Greg?
I totally agree, Di. I think this is one of the largest opportunities in our lifetime, not only to rethink the way that healthcare is delivered in New Zealand, but for health tech to lead New Zealand's economic growth. So to answer some of these questions and tap into the big brains, not only of our panel, but also our audience, we've got a Q&A coming up with Maxine Simmons, Executive Director of CureKids Ventures, Jonathan Lucas, partner of James and Wells, and Brian Ward, who's the Director and founder of Aroa Biosurgery. So deep experience in terms of commercialization of intellectual property, investment, and sort of entrepreneurship in the space. So our first questions are to Brian. I'll just read out a brief bio for him. Brian founded Aroa Biosurgery, an Auckland-based privately held soft tissue repair company that's been responsible for leading the company's growth from startup through to becoming vertically integrated medical device business with substantial US sales and developing international presence. And the question to Brian is, what stage is your business currently at, and how has the funding received to date influenced that journey so far?
Thanks, Greg. So we, as Greg said, we're a soft tissue repair company. There's about 120 people here in New Zealand and another 30 or so in the US. We've got 5 patented products that are in the market in the US and regulatory approvals now in over 35 countries. And for our existing products, the opportunity in front of us in the US alone is probably about $2 billion. So we're at a really exciting stage. From an investment perspective, the company's been predominantly funded through New Zealand private investors. So we've raised seed rounds from angel investors, VC rounds, and then more latterly some institutional money. We've been incredibly well supported by the local VCs and all of the major investors now. From another thing that's been key with us for developing the company has been corporate investment as well. So we've done a number of licensing deals over the years that have been a significant part of the capital that we've raised for the company. So that's been key. We've also been really lucky to secure grant funding as well. So all of those things have kind of come together for us to allow us to build the company. In terms of next steps, we're really scaling up the business now. So, probably interested in, looking at the public markets, and that's something that we're investigating.
Cool. After more than 10 years focused on North American market and substantive inroads in Europe and Central America, Aroa's tissue repair products are set to be available in New Zealand. It kind of seems in the reverse order for most companies. What does it mean to you to be bringing your products to your home market?
Yeah, it's great. Since we started the company, we've been solely focused on succeeding in the US. We haven't had the opportunity to bring our products back to New Zealand until really recently. So, for us, our products change patients' lives, and what we're able to do is to offer these soft tissue regeneration products to many more patients. And I think for us to be able to bring that back to New Zealand and for patients here to have the benefit of that, that's fantastic for all of us.
It sounds really exciting. Thanks, Brian, and we'll get on to some more questions at the end of the panel. Our next panelist, many of you will know, she's quite a high-profile figure in the life sciences and investment area. Maxine Simmons is Chief Executive of CureKids Ventures. She's a director at CureKids, an early-stage investment fund that invests in commercialization, innovation products and services with the potential to benefit child health. She's also established biotechnology consulting company, BioCatalyst, which advises early-stage biotechnology ventures on commercialization and capital raising. So an enormous experience in both funding and entrepreneurship. Maxine, can you please give us some examples of your most successful investments to date, and what key factors you think have contributed to their success?
So I think you asked about success. Yeah. Well, I guess the question really is it most about money or is it most about impact? CureKids Ventures, being a wholly owned entity from the child health research funding charity CureKids, has to worry about both those issues. But to date, money-wise, I think it's hard to go past its $200,000 research project back in the 1990s. So it's earned over, I think, 30 million from that research project. That would be, 150 times return. That's hard to beat in our early stage investment space. And that research is now 25 years on A2 Milk, which when I last checked was a $14 billion market cap. And that was been, frankly, a very hard act to follow and a pretty difficult thing to eclipse. But in terms of most impact on child health, well, no doubt further time will tell. CureKids Ventures has been investing actively since 2008, so that's 12 years on now. And most of our portfolio companies are still very much in the early stage. So I guess investee company Pictor, it's currently been in the news because it's just managed to get a $500,000 grant from the New Zealand government, and that's to accelerate its launch of a comprehensive COVID-19 antibody antigen test. So in that diagnostic space, Pictor's been selling its maternal infectious disease product diagnostic to remote laboratories in India for some years now. So if you talk about impact, I mean, the impact on child health in a business like that is very high. So another great example, I'm very happy to be able to say that CureKids Ventures was a very early investor in Brian's company, Aroa Biosurgery. So yeah, we've been in the space and actively investing since, as I said, 2008, and it's great to start to see those companies coming through. But as I said, in terms of key factors of that success, well, you've got to look at early stage investment as very much a portfolio play, and we accept that some of them will succeed, some will fail. But we like to think that the CureKids Ventures and CureKids brand provides some support early on for those companies. We've got access, and we can provide some access to our New Zealand and global networks. And I think just that support in the early stages and that belief that in the value that of both the impact and the potential investment returns that investing in this health tech sector can deliver is really great and useful support in the early stages. So, our commitment, I think, is very much illustrated by our co-sponsoring the TIN report. I think, starting to have some more visibility to what the sector is really managing to achieve is critical to people supporting it in the future.
Do you think that the health tech sector is at an inflection point, given what you've seen to date?
I believe so. I mean, clearly, we've invested in the digital health space over the last few years, and just getting early adoption and traction, both within New Zealand, but even in external markets, has really, really been a challenge. Where the last few months, all of a sudden, everybody wants to do remote stuff, and digital health and that whole telehealth sector is really starting to just be accelerated because the opportunities there now. People can, once they start to use it, can see that it can be applied. It's perfectly legitimate. It works. It still provides good healthcare, and I think that's been the challenge for a lot of those companies. So yeah, once you start to see those things change, it's rapid.
Awesome. Do you see a large volume of investment applications, and when you're looking at one vital child-saving technology against another, how do you evaluate which one to
Well,
invest in?
CureKids Ventures is pretty well known in the New Zealand early stage investment community, and I think our investment mandate is also well known. So we're pretty lucky in that most of our investment opportunities actually are referred from within that ecosystem, and they're already a little bit screened when they arrive on our door. We probably receive or look seriously at around 20 applications in a year, and I think on average we're investing in around 3 or 4 of those on an annual basis. We see enough, and it's encouraging, that it's actually growing.
And is there any particular differentiator that enables you to choose one versus another that's important?
I think, as I said earlier, Greg, it's very much a portfolio play, and yes, we can be as clever as we like, but in terms of picking winners, some will succeed, some won't. Obviously, we don't invest on day one in anything that couldn't succeed in our view, and we're looking at the team, the product or service it has, and the market opportunity it has, its timing in the market. But most importantly, I think we're looking for the fact that if there are impediments to the way that company could progress, that they're addressed. We don't invest unless we can see that they could be addressed. So I think that's probably sums us up.
Awesome. Thanks, Maxine. Our next panelist is Jonathan Lucas, a partner at James and Wells. People often or used to say, "Oh, New Zealand's great at innovating stuff, but really lousy at commercialisation." And so James and Wells are in the space. He heads up their medical technology team. He's a champion for innovation, specialising in drafting patent specifications and supporting patent litigations for many local and multinational companies. Jonathan, you must see a lot of companies. How can the health tech companies, and in fact all health tech sector, use IP and patents to protect their R&D from competitors?
Thanks, Greg, and first of all, hi everyone. It's great to have the opportunity to speak to you all today. To answer the question, I think the reason companies undertake R&D is really to develop new products and services and improve products and services to give themselves a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And IP is really a bunch of tools that companies have at their disposal to protect that competitive advantage that is generated by the R&D. We see huge amounts are invested in R&D in the health tech sector in New Zealand. Your very helpful report, Greg, tells us that last year over $200 million was invested in R&D by this sector, which is 12% of revenue. So given that level of investment, it's obviously critical to protect that investment by securing IP rights where possible. How is IP used? Well, it can be used in a number of ways. I mean, principally, it's there to prevent competitors from using products and services that have that same competitive advantage in them, or to deter them from doing so, or perhaps through formal enforcement. But they can also, IP can also be used to control how those products and services are used in the market through licensing, for example.
It's a pretty tough world out there, and IP, particularly patents, can be very expensive in terms of the financial resources, the time, financial resource of the company, the time, and money that particularly early stage companies have got available. How would you suggest that companies utilise the services of someone like yourself to help ensure and maintain a relevant IP portfolio that's both attractive to investors and provides sufficient protection against third parties whilst being cost conscious?
Yeah, so first of all, I'll just emphasise the reason that why IP is attractive to investors, which I think that truly is the case, that investors I speak to see IP as being hugely valuable, not just in this sector but in others too. But I think particularly in this sector, you speak to investors, and one of the first questions they're asking of these companies is, or what IP do you have, and what's your IP strategy? And I think the lack of either of those two things can be a bit of a black mark. And that's because investors really understand the power that IP has for helping a technology company to establish a niche in the market, to create the revenue opportunities, and for its intrinsic value to a company's worth. In terms of the expense of IP and being cost conscious, I think I've got two answers to that question. I think the first is probably a practical answer. I think it's always really beneficial when there's someone within an organization who has a really good understanding of what IP is, and how IP can be used, and how that company actually intends to use IP to its advantage. So someone who can really talk the language just helps engagement with professional service providers a lot more efficient. So that could be an in-house IP manager, or someone in a different role but tasked with that function. I wouldn't advocate a DIY approach. We see things that can go wrong when people cut corners, when they don't engage the experts when they really ought to, but having an informed person there can really help. The second answer I'd give there is to, I guess, look at what underlies the question. I think it's obviously always right to be cost conscious, and especially at the moment, and that's always the case for startups. But I think that sometimes if a company's focusing heavily on the costs alone, perhaps that's an indication that they're not quite seeing the value of IP. Perhaps they've just been told by someone else that, hey, there's this thing called IP and you need to go get some, and they want to do that in the cheapest way possible. And that's probably not always the best approach. I mean, the fact is that IP is expensive to generate, and the greatest cost of that is, of course, the actual R&D itself. And then after that, protecting the IP, okay, it of course requires some further investment, but that's really a fraction of the cost of the initial R&D in the first place. So I think it's to put the cost of IP protection in perspective, but absolutely always important to be cost conscious.
Thanks, Jonathan. That's awesome. We'll drill down into that more later. Okay, so now we're going to pass over to some questions that I want all three panelists to answer in the order that you've previously answered the questions. First question is, in your opinion, what has been the sector in New Zealand, and how could this be leveraged in a world facing the challenges of COVID-19 and beyond? Brian, if we could start with you.
I think what's really interesting in New Zealand is people have a really good can-do attitude, and what I've found certainly in the businesses I've been involved in is that people are good at sorting out complex problems quite quickly and turning their mind to it. So I think that's a cultural aspect of the country, and I think that we're quite good at working together in teams to do that. So I think that's part of what makes the country quite innovative, but also is something that really makes for healthcare companies that can be successful internationally.
Maxine.
I think it's our really excellent and world-class medical research. We've got a really good, strong base here in New Zealand, and that's both in animal and human health. I think New Zealand, we're generally really well connected. It's a small country, so we talk to one another, so we're multidisciplinary. We're generally pragmatic problem solvers. And that lateral thinking or problem solving, that ability has been pretty well illustrated, I think, with Brian's company. Aroa Biosurgery is a great example. And he's a New Zealand trained vet, I believe you are. That's right, Brian. Now a founder and managing director of a human wound care business, which is based on utilising a byproduct of our sheep meat industry, right? It's a nice illustration. So how do we leverage that excellent science and that lateral thinking and our multidisciplinary connectivity in the COVID-19 space? We really are already doing that with, Pictor, for example, which I've mentioned before, but we've got other investee companies such as Avalia and The Clinician, which have also been mentioned previously. So yeah, we're doing it. Believe it's happening.
Awesome. Jonathan.
Yeah, I think the secret of success of the sector is really the people we have in New Zealand. We've got a highly skilled, highly educated population of really diverse people from all walks of life and geographies. And so I think when you put those people together in an environment where doing business is pretty easy, you breed that kind of success. And I think that diversity is particularly beneficial in the health tech sector because it's a sector that kind of sits in the middle of a bunch of different technologies. You've got mechanical engineering, electronics, biotech, software, pharmaceuticals. They all come together in the health tech sector. So having all those groups of people who come together in an environment where they can freely talk to each other and collaborate and share ideas has really helped the sector. And I think it's bound to help us face those challenges of COVID. I think we've already seen it with the use of telehealth to keep things going, and we're already seeing a huge number of new innovations to try and tackle either the problem itself or how to carry on operating in the new world.
Awesome, thanks, Jonathan. The next question is, what could other tech sector industries learn from the success of health tech? Brian?
Yeah, for me, I think the thing that's really different about health tech, particularly the med tech space, maybe biotech and pharma, is it's a long game. Compared to other forms of tech, there's long gestation period in this business. So you do need patience, you need persistence. And I think that's maybe a little bit different from other areas. The awesome thing about health tech is that, the long-term value in these businesses is enormous, and the capability that you can build, and then the ability to go on and build on that over a long period of time. So I think you create some very strong foundations from investing in these sorts of businesses.
Maxine?
I would say that they should be as cross-sector connected as they can be. I think it's really important that you don't get siloed into one particular area. That's where be open to some new ideas, foster an innovation mindset in your business, and I think those sectors need to be appreciating that things are converging more and more. There is no such thing as a sector anymore, frankly. All these sectors are interacting in different ways. So yeah, for me, it's just leveraging that and seeing where else it can go, where else can it be applied.
Awesome, Jonathan.
Yeah, I agree with Maxine's comments there. I think other sectors can learn to kind of push the boundaries like the health tech sector here has done. You see other sectors, and perhaps I'm thinking of things like primary industries, manufacturing. Sometimes they've got a bit of a tendency to play things safe, that they've got established markets, existing products, and they rely on more slow-moving or organic growth. And I think sometimes that hinders their ability to reach into new markets or achieve global success. And I think the health tech sector is really great at taking those risks and going beyond what they know, whether it's geographical markets or bringing different bits of technology together.
Yeah, I was thinking and asking those questions, probably the secret is in the three panelists here, we need more people like Maxime to find more people like Brian Ward who can execute these things, and the kind of commercial support that people like Jonathan can provide to enable us to be world beaters. So now we're going to pass over to Brendan, my colleague who's operations manager for TIN, and he's going to curate a Q&A from the audience. Over to you, Brendan.
Thanks very much, Greg. Yeah, thanks everyone for the questions that have been coming through so far. Just to some of our questions here, the first one here is from Simon, who's noting that if the health tech sector is doing well, how can we capitalize on this and get New Zealand Inc., as in government, uni, etc., to focus on the sector as a key initiative for helping New Zealand grow out of the coming recession?
Companies, I think, is really important. So, seeding companies that can be successful. I think we need an good ongoing pipeline of high quality medtech companies. So I think grant funding is important.
We also need the Series A, and it would be nice if we had more of that coming out of in the New Zealand sector, out of the New Zealand investment sector. Often we're having to go offshore quite early for our investment in these companies, and that can have all sorts of positive and negative consequences. So more Series A funding would be helpful.
I think after COVID, there's going to be the realization that it's critical to diversify our economy even further. The reliance on primary exports to particularly big markets who could easily go into lockdown and have these kind of issues that we've seen just highlights the importance of investment in sectors like the health tech sector, who are truly diversified, global, and hopefully the existing success that the sector's had will put that idea in the minds of government and help to promote that kind of diversification in the future.
Brendan, can you hear me? So in answer to that question, I think that there's potentially three things. One, we should go to our larger companies, the Fisher & Paykel's, the AFDs and Douglas Pharmaceuticals, and say, what can you bring forward to create more jobs that we can support? I think that's a key thing in terms of trying to create jobs now with companies of scale is probably the easiest way, if that's a triage in terms of to absorb the impact of the decline in tourism. And then, of course, the other areas for the smaller companies, as Maxime was talking about, in terms of how can we get more Series A and early stage investment, and particularly at that early stage, look at the technologies that have a longer term future in the post-COVID-19 environment around telehealth, remote sensing, delivery of medication to patients outside the hospital environment. And how can we fast track that within the New Zealand ecosystem to get those being trialled and used in hospitals, and have trial data and commercial first revenues that will help attract follow-on investment.
I think an observation I'd make is that the New Zealand healthcare sector has not been a particularly early adopter and hasn't always been particularly keen to see New Zealand, to trial, if you like, New Zealand based products or services. There's been this, I guess, a bit of a reluctance to do that, and I think the COVID-19 scenario may well change all of that, and I'd certainly encourage them to be a little bit more open and more supportive generally of New Zealand innovation. It's hard. It's very hard for our early stage companies to actually get traction in the market. I don't know whether you have a comment from a Rora's perspective. I'm just great that now being released here in New Zealand, but it's not easy because it's a small market. But often companies are asked, early stage companies are asked, well, what about in your home country, in your home market? How much traction have you got? And can actually be a bit of an impediment to growth.
Yeah, I mean, certainly for Aroa, all of our our first human study was done in New Zealand, but most of our early commercial work or early clinical work was done in the US, and it was really because it was really hard to get New Zealand clinicians to be interested in the technology. So we found it much easier in the US than we did in New Zealand, which is a shame. So yeah, I agree. I completely agree with Maxine. Being a bit more open to local companies, I think would go a long way.
That Justin, who's speaking particularly from context of DHBs, and there may be a few people from DHBs on the event here. So his comment is they have access to existing funding sources such as KiwiNet and university partnerships, but they're experiencing a bottleneck, and that noting that DHBs have little money to invest in innovation experimentation. How can we fund capability within DHBs to enable more innovation?
Can I answer that, Brendan?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Go for it, Greg.
So I think these are extraordinary times. And, there are a lot of people hurting out there. I think we've got to take major interventions in the way that the government has put New Zealand in shutdown and kind of open the doors between DHBs and the HealthTech sector, and by that making sure that the DHBs are properly funded and resourced to engage in this area, look at some of the requirements around purchasing and pharmac and those kinds of regulations, and enable them to health tech companies to engage more freely. I guess it's an issue of money and resources that as companies like F&P and Aurora and Douglas Pharmaceuticals pay handsomely. That's my opinion anyway.
Can I jump in too, Brendan? Hi, Brendan. Can I jump in on here? Well, I think that, everything is true about DHBs needing to have more freedom to actually innovate. But I think it also needs some changes in policy with the ministries, because the DHBs need to be mandated to have research and innovation as part of their activities. At the moment, they're really focused on providing care to people. And I think some of the work that was done in the health research strategy a couple of years ago actually identified this issue. So with the COVID-19 environment, I really would love to see some policy changes that made our DHBs more amenable to actually working in with startups and researchers to innovate.
And I think having a more outcome-focused results. I think a lot of things that are measured in our healthcare system aren't really value measures in terms of how the patient benefits. A lot of it is very much a cost. I think we need to change the KPIs that we're using for our DHB, and that will help. Because there are some obvious innovations that could be adopted, but there's no funding source for them. Like the telehealth stuff. It's been a real battle to get some of those things that are quite, the DHBs will say, oh, that makes good sense, but we can't fund it because this pot of money doesn't exist. Well, we've got to change that.
I think it can also be almost a marketing point. When we think of health tech innovation in New Zealand, we think of universities and startups. I don't think we always think about the amount of innovation that is going on in DHBs. And so I think by telling more stories about what they're doing and how they're being successful can help just to draw attention to them as areas of innovation, and that will help the funding come.
Yeah, just government support for being innovative in itself. That's okay to do that, to be that. Don't undervalue that. It can be quite, it can certainly accelerate the whole process.
It's not uncommon in the US and other countries to be able to have, grant funding available within hospitals for clinicians that have, particular interests in areas that, pays for part of their time. And I think, that's great for innovation. It's great for attracting and retaining outstanding clinicians as well. So I think it seems to me that, as part of a kind of a general strategy for getting good people, that have that being part of the mix is probably really important, as well as the innovation component that you get from it.
We've got another question here from Steve, who's saying that acknowledging the uptake of new medical technology is significantly driven by podium presentations and discussions at international scientific meetings. How will this happen in a new post-COVID-19 world with massively reduced international travel and meetings? Throw that open to everyone.
I think it's an advantage for New Zealand.
Yeah.
Because it's hard work going to those international conferences. It's a long way and it takes a lot of time. And all of a sudden, I'm finding I'm getting invited to all sorts of things remotely, virtually, that I would never have had easy access to in the past. So the whole world is just becoming more open and more accessible. So I think it's a good thing.
Completely. I mean, we just were an exhibitor at a large wound conference in the US. It was completely virtual. It was just like being at a regular conference. There was concurrent sessions, video presentations. It was very slick. And, as an exhibitor there, fantastic in terms of the flow of people through our virtual booth and our ability to, get leads. So, I think there's some really neat tools out there now that people are using. And, to Maxine's point, the great thing is you don't need to get on a plane and travel for 12 hours. You can wake up in the morning, have your bowl of cereal, and then you're there. It's fantastic. So I think it actually levels the playing field a lot. And, I think it's really interesting. I mean, I think with the period that we've had with COVID-19, clinicians are much more receptive to those sorts of mediums than they were 3 months ago. And I think once this whole thing clears up, we're going to see that stays, and it's going to be part of the mix. So people are going to change, and I think that engagement with other tools now is going to become, it's going to become an advantage to lots of companies.
Yeah, I think it's the old tagline that necessity is the mother of invention, and we've definitely all seen in the last 7 weeks how through necessity we've had to all connect in different ways and showing that here and now, and I think that's going to have proven to a lot of people that you don't have to be physically together to show off a new product or to talk through a business model or whatever it is. So yeah, I agree that it levels the playing field.
More come through, and what we'll do is we'll endeavour to answer some of those directly if we can. But right now, I will. We've got like just a couple of minutes left, so I just want to hand back over to Greg just to wrap things up.
Thanks to Jonathan, Maxine, and our panel, and I'm sure they'd be happy. Anyone in the audience who wanted to contact them, we could facilitate that. I'd like to, I think one of the things that's come through in the presentations is there's a huge opportunity for the health tech sector. This year, the technology export sector will become our second largest export category. And so as the largest market sector within that, I think we really need to put a lot more brains behind how we structure and fast track some of these really exciting companies into the market. We've gone to the next slide. Finally, a commercial message. So this is quite, as you can see, this is a passion for TIN. We have a team of people totally fixated on growing New Zealand's technology export sector, and a growing number of members and membership from many of the companies we've spoken today, people like Datacom, Fisher & Paykel Healthcare, Aroa Biosurgery, AFT Pharmaceuticals, etc. And so for those companies in the space, if you want to become a TIN member, that's different from being surveyed in a report. these are people. This is a membership that enables you to engage more with other tin companies, get access to events, discounts on the events, and benchmarking reports. Please go on to our website to find out more. We're committed to growing the New Zealand technology export sector, and in particular the health tech sector. And then once again, I'd like to very much thank our sponsors, NZ HIT, HINZ, MTANS, MB, NZTE, ATID, CureKids, and F&P. Thanks again to our panel. It's been a great event, and thank you to our teams for pulling it all together. And kei kuri anō, see you next time. Thank you.